Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel. Thanks for logging on. If you enjoy these videos, do me a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Watchbox Reviews. I would really appreciate it, and I promise to update daily. If you like this watch, you can see it and purchase it on our website, thewatchbox.com. And today we are discussing the 2015 limited edition of 100 pieces in white gold, the Grand Seiko 62GS reissue, technically the SBGR0-91. This is a watch that is true to proportion, detail, character, and very close in size to the original 1967 Grand Seiko 62GS. This is an important timepiece because it's not just one of the rarest modern Grand Seiko timepieces of any description, it's also one of the most unusual. The timepiece on my wrist, a moderate 37.6 millimeters in diameter, differs by about 1 millimeter from the original case. Nice and slim, though not an ultra thin, 13.4 millimeters thick. You can see the step to the case flank and the slope of the sapphire that will let it slip underneath the dress cuff. Between the lugs, 19 millimeter spacing, somewhat vintage in its stance, and then lug-to-lug, a very manageable 42.3 millimeters. The watch does feel and look like a vintage piece on the wrist. I can recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference, and my wrist, of course, 16 centimeters in circumference for reference. The watch has a rich but minimalist, lightly bolstered, high-gloss, medium rectangular scale alligator leather strap, folded edges, monotone stitch on the underside calfskin. The watch has a matching white gold pin buckle with a vintage style Grand Seiko polished logo in relief against a rusticated background framed by a high polish pin buckle frame, and you will note it's slotted on the underside to allow the strap to fit flush when strapped onto the wrist. The strap actually recesses into the buckle. Attention to detail is rich with this one, and that continues on the case. The idea back in 1967 was to broadcast the then revolutionary automatic winding Grand Seiko 62GS by moving the crown down to 4 o'clock, recessing it and minimizing its size, as it would not be needed to wind and energize the watch on a daily basis. It didn't need to encumber the profile of the watch, and that's just where we start. You'll note a completely bezel-free timepiece. This watch has a artfully faceted case that can create the appearance of a bezel at some places, but in fact it is simply a big one-piece case on the top. Lugs, bezel, mid-case, all a single component. And you will note, and we're going to try to get a little bit closer here, that it employs Grand Seiko's famed tin plate Zaratsu polish on its white gold. We're used to seeing it on steel and titanium, but seeing it executed with total optical clarity and flawless finish on precious metal is truly a treat and a privilege. You will note the characteristic polyhedron case form that has been a hallmark of Grand Seiko for decades. You'll also note that there is polish between the lugs, as well as a sharp cleft or crevice where the lugs meet the mid-case. So there's a sharp and strikingly defined junction between the case and the lugs, between the lugs on both sides. Part of the nuance of this case, you note something new every time you examine this case, top, bottom, side to side, and end on end. The crystal is box section and somewhat conical in profile. It's expensive to make a box section sapphire, just as it's more expensive to make a cambered or curved sapphire. This is as expensive as it gets, the box section being the most costly to specify for a watch. Of course, Grand Seiko also making its own, so tremendous vertical integration as well as a cost-no-object attitude towards this watch. Let's get a little bit more light here. You can see that the dial is a silver sunburst and minimized so that it's unencumbered, vintage-inspired, clean, and enduring. Just as the original featured a paucity of dial text and printing, so too does this one, with the notation of Diashock being a wonderful throwback to the 60s. Heat-blued steel, needle-style seconds hand, counterweighted, with Dauphine hands at center, beautifully mirror-polished and faceted. The dial furniture is second to none on a Grand Seiko. As good as Rolex, which is to say as good as any in the world. The sunburst is rich and somewhat complex in that it has a light champagne or off-white coloration about it. It's not a pure cold silver. Outboard, the minutes and seconds track stepped down from the center dial and a faceted applique frame for the date. The movement inside, Grand Seiko 9S65, Automatic winding, 72-hour power reserve, 28,800 vibrations per hour. Does feature Grand Seiko's proprietary Dia-shock, and remarkably for a dress-oriented, vintage-inspired timepiece, 100 meters water resistant. It does feature hacking seconds and a quick set date, and Grand Seiko pronounces this watch to be accurate to within -3 +5 seconds, or better than the COSC, per 24 hours whenever it is regulated by the factory. This is a timepiece that has not just a vintage look on the front, but a vintage look on the back, where the Grand Seiko lion himself, or perhaps herself, has been rendered in a 1960s form, a throwback to the halcyon days of the late 1960s, when Grand Seiko, then as now, one of the most innovative, progressive, and boundary-pushing watch brands on the globe. A timepiece that's a throwback without any compromise in materials, fit, and finish. You can see this Grand Seiko 62GS reissue, the SBGR091, and make it yours on the watch box.